Hi, my name is Mark Crawley and welcome to Diversita Connect. Today we are going to talk about quite an interesting subject around inclusivity from your managers. So those who are working in an office at the moment or working for someone or reporting to someone, there's a few indicators that we maybe learn over the years of Diversita that hopefully may be interesting. So we're going to cover a few of those today. It's not going to be an exhaustive list, but it's just a starting point, and it's very likely we'll do a follow-up video to this just so you have a little bit more information. But there's some things that we would say that most inclusive managers, or particularly neuro-inclusive managers, will do on a day-to-day basis in our experience. So let's get moving on this and see what we can talk about. But look, I just wanted to set a little bit of a scene or set some context really about what it's like to be neurodivergent in the workplace. We sometimes don't share this data on Diversita Connect, but this is the sort of thing I share with companies. So those will know, most people will know, hopefully, that 17 to 20% of the UK are likely to be neurodivergent. It can maybe be a bit higher in certain pockets, of course, like technology, etc. But yeah, it's around that number, and that's based on the most recent Autistica statistics. A few other stats that have been shared in various other reports are quite a large amount of individuals are not disclosing at work still, and again, that's can be based around how inclusive or the relationship you have with your manager is. A huge amount of neurodivergent individuals are taking time off for mental health challenges, predominantly what we would call secondary mental health challenges, as in you're not supported at work, which then means that you then get stressed, etc., and take time off. There was another statistic in a report, I think it was from the Tech Talent Charter from memory, that nearly 70% of leaders or managers do not believe that autistic employees would be a good team fit. And the whole idea of team and cultural fit is an ongoing subject that I'm always challenging organizations on. And on the basis of organizations, we still have a significant number of companies in the UK that don't have a focus on neurodiversity. You see over 70%. Now, I will say that figure is slightly distorted by organizations or companies like the local butchers or your local bakers or hairdressers, etc. But there's obviously, within the corporate world, it's a bit better, but there's still a lot of companies that don't focus on neurodiversity as one of their diversity pillars. A lot of individuals are still not being offered adjustments, and that figure it's slightly provocative because it means people aren't being offered adjustments. I mean, a lot of people are still asking for adjustments and having to request it, but that self-advocacy piece is something we cover in a few other webinars as well. One stat that I found really interesting, and again based on the Tech Talent Charter report of 2024, is that companies believe only 3% of their workforce is neurodivergent, or they only have the data to try and make sure to make that, to sort of get to that figure. So there's a lot of things going on here. If people aren't disclosing and companies are relying on actual data coming through for individuals that are disclosing, that's going to be low because there's a lot of people not disclosing still. Different companies may measure around the fact that whether you have a diagnosis or whether you've disclosed or etc. But I would say on the basis of the figure in the top left-hand side, companies and managers should realize that a lot more than 3% of their workforce is likely to be neurodivergent. And particularly in technology, the same report, the Tech Talent report, and we've covered this before in an overview of that report, is that it's estimated, that out of the, I think it was 500 people they surveyed, 500 technologists they surveyed on that report, 53% of those individuals said they were neurodivergent. So particularly for tech organizations, if they are thinking only 3% of their workforce is neurodivergent, they are way off. And finally, and again, this sort of comes, links us very, very well into the things we're going to discuss today, is that 92% of neurodivergent employees have encountered some level of workplace bias, right? So you would suggest that not many environments are being overly supportive, or certainly it's supportive in the way that a lot of neurodivergent employees in the UK need. So this sort of brings us on really to the idea is your manager neuro-inclusive, right? And there's a few things that we would suggest that you think about when we talk about this subject. So we're not going to cover everything, but look, there's a few things here. So clear communication, so written and verbal instructions, we would say, is a good indicator. Allowing processing time and extra time for responses and changes. Structured support, creating that psychological safety, flexible working, and embracing those communication preferences. So we're going to cover those in a bit more detail now. So if you look at clear communication, so I can't tell you how many times I talk to neurodivergent individuals and there's a communication or miscommunication breakdown. We're dealing with one situation at the moment where there's a lot of challenges within the workplace environment for this individual. And I would say that a lot of them are based around just miscommunication and the fact that the manager is not communicating what that individual needs, right, in a clear, concise way that is, I'd say, relatively tailored to the way that person needs to hear it. And you're not using things like bullet points, using emails that are too long, throwing verbal communication at people and not making it specific. Like, I just need you to have a quick look at this and let me know when it's done. And yeah, tell me what you think. Those type of things, rather than this is what I want you to do and this is when I need you to do it, please. Many thanks. Very clear, very concise, right? So if your manager's not doing that, and regardless of the industry you're in, then I think that's an area of opportunity for improvement. The other thing is allowing processing time, right? So again, a lot of the time, urgency, stress, then busy environments, right? They don't allow sometimes the opportunity just to take a step back, really understand what's being asked, really understand what's going on, really understand what this project is, really understand what this big change has been, all of these other things. Managers are sometimes so stretched, and I do sympathize a lot sometimes because they themselves get a lot of pressure, particularly if they're working for someone else. So they sometimes may not allow a neurodivergent employee to have the processing time that they need. And then obviously that impacts performance and sometimes the results, etc. So just trying to think about, okay, is your manager giving you this time? Again, one of those key indicators. Before we move on to the next subject, I just want to make it noted really that all of these things doesn't mean that your manager is not being or doesn't want to be neuro-inclusive. There's just a few things sometimes to think, okay, these are opportunities for training, etc. And we say that manager training is one of the most effective ways an organization can progress, because your relationship as a neurodivergent employee with the person you report directly to is so important. So again, I'll just pop that small caveat in there before we move on to the remaining areas. So another area is structured support. So what this means a lot of the time is that you have had the opportunity to disclose and there's a support process in place, right? And that might mean that there's an accommodation around reasonable adjustments and appreciation. It might mean that you have regular check-ins. It might mean that you work with a job coach. It might mean that you have just an opportunity just to have a conversation with your manager now and then, just to talk about things like overwhelm or clarity on instructions, etc. But I would suggest that having the option of structured support or structured time and structured adjustments is incredibly important, because again, a lot of our community, and we don't like to ask for things, right? So having things in place just gives a bit of reassurance. So is your manager offering you structured support? Again, can be a good indicator. Another area is, of course, the creation of psychological safety. So this can mean a variety of things, right? But some of the things that you can mention are your manager does not accept abusive or I'd say any behavior that makes someone not feel a sense of belonging or welcome within that environment, right? And that's really important. Creating an environment of openness where you can make a comment or challenge someone in a very, very obviously structured, polite and practical way, without feeling that you're going to be ostracized or anything like that, or berated. Having an environment where people can open and ask questions and can bring a bigger part of themselves to work, etc. is that your environment? Does that feel like your environment? And I would suggest if it doesn't, then that's always going to be a difficult environment to disclose in. So I don't want any of our community feeling that they're in the wrong in these instances. If you genuinely don't feel you have this environment, then that's not a psychological safe environment to try and be a bigger part of yourself. Right? There's always going to be more things that neurodivergent individuals can do in self-advocating, educating those around you. And of course, just because you're neurodivergent doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, right? Doesn't mean that you're always going to be a perfect employee. But I think having a psychological safe environment to be able to talk about things a bit more openly is a really good step to disclosure. And I would say that if your environment or your manager creates this type of environment, there's a lot of things that will have a domino effect on from that point onwards. Another thing, of course, is flexible working, right? And are you allowed to work flexibly? And it doesn't just mean are you allowed to work from home, because I realise that some jobs don't can't accommodate that, right? And understand that. But it's also really important to think about, okay, does my manager sometimes understand that certain shift patterns are better for me and tries to accommodate where possible? Obviously, you have the challenge and it has a knock-on effect with other people, but then you have to start thinking about equity rather than equality, right? Does someone actually need to work at this time of day because they're a million times more effective, right? Maybe not a million, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but a lot more effective, right? So the idea of flexible working is just, I would say, your manager creating an environment where you can have these conversations and you can be open about the times when you work better, about the times maybe the following week, if you've got a lot on, that you prefer to work these shifts, traveling a little bit off peak because you don't like to get on the crowded bus, train or tube, right? All of these things come into it. It might also mean sometimes that you come in a bit earlier and you need a bit of a break in the day, right? Again, understanding and appreciating that. No one's asking from our community for loads and loads of favors here or to work less hours than other colleagues for the same pay, etc. But what they are asking sometimes is a bit of understanding, and flexible working can be one of those components. So the last area now is around talking about embracing communication preferences. Does your manager understand that you do like verbal instructions? Does the manager understand you prefer bullet point instructions, that you like follow-up notes, or you prefer a bit of an agenda in advance, or you like having that opportunity to maybe have both, right, where they give instructions verbally and then they just append a quick summary afterwards, that they understand that works for you? And I think managers are sometimes a little bit too dictatorial, in my opinion, around communicating in the way that they want to communicate. So is your manager open to these different styles? And if they are, then that can really help you as an employee. So again, thinking about that, because it used to be, of course, where it was quite a manual task to try and communicate in a variety of ways. But now with things like AI and automation tools and note-taking tools, etc., for me, there's no real excuse for not giving notes after a meeting, particularly a virtual meeting now. There's no real excuse not to be able to send an agenda out before, because obviously you want the meeting to be as effective as possible anyway. So that's great for everyone. I would find it quite reassuring if I was a busy manager, if I gave a verbal instruction, to then send an email afterwards with a few clarifying points, etc. So embracing these communication preferences is important. And I would say if your manager is doing this with you and your manager is saying, okay, how do you like to receive instructions? How do you like to communicate? What works for you? Then again, that's a good indicator that they're neuro-inclusive. But of course, if they don't, then that's obviously the indicator of the exact opposite. So there's a few things there that hopefully will give you some food for thought, really, and thinking, okay, are these happening in my workplace at the moment? Are they happening in the environment I'm working in? And have a think, right? There's always going to be situations where managers are still learning. And I think I want our community to be understanding of that. And no one's going to be perfect. But as long as there is a dialogue and a conversation, that can be important, right? So in terms of the sort of next actions, really. So look, Thomas, I'm just going to redo this slide. Sorry, Sam. So Thomas, I'm just going to redo this slide now. So the next steps, right? We'll add this to the webinar collection where you can comment or ask questions, of course, but please add any additional comment suggestions and let us know, do you feel supported at work, right? Love to know a little bit more about some good practice in particular, things that you've seen that have worked really well for you. Be great to see, but equally so, and obviously we don't want you to share anything you're uncomfortable with or is going to get you into any type of trouble. But yeah, if there's some examples of managers or examples of situations really where you haven't feel supported, then of course we're happy to hear those as well, because we're always learning ourselves. Of course, if you have something specific, you can use the DM service if you want to speak to us. But thank you. We hope this has been useful today. It was a subject that come up from my wife Julia, who said, look, that we should try to do something really to try and give sort of our community an idea of, okay, these are the things that we see on a regular basis at Diversita that can help. They can really help, and it sort of mirrors the training and advice we give to managers when we do deliver that training. But listen, we love your opinions, we love your thoughts, and of course, we always thank you for watching these and look forward to seeing your next webinar. So thank you very much for today. See you soon.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And scan the QR code to join the Diversita Connect community.